This is Episode 8, Decline and Closure, When the Model Collapsed. Welcome to Ancient Secrets and Haunted Journeys. I'm Jessica, and today we're following Eastern State into its final decades. When the original idea was already gone, the building was aging fast, and the state finally faced the question it had avoided for years. Do we keep pouring money into a crumbling machine, or do we shut it down? This episode is facts over vibes. We're going to track the decline through three forces. 1. The system mismatch. A prison designed for one philosophy, forced to operate as something else. 2. The physical reality, aging infrastructure, and costly repairs. 3. The endgame timeline. The state stopping operations in 1970, brief reuse in 1971, and the prison's final closure. If you've been picturing Eastern State as the famous old prison, today you'll see it as what it really was near the end. A place built to control people through architecture, slowly losing control over its own architecture. Map check. A building that outlived its purpose. Eastern State opened in 1829. It was designed around separate confinement, solitude, silence, and cell-based labor. But the Pennsylvania system was officially abandoned at Eastern State in 1913. After that, the prison operated more like a congregate institution, meaning the original one person, one cell, one world concept no longer defined daily life the way it once did. That matters because the architecture never stopped being a solitude machine. Eastern State's design was expensive to operate. Heat, plumbing, stone maintenance, and the sheer staff demands of a sprawling facility built around separation. As decades passed, the prison expanded far beyond the early plan. The original 7 cell blocks multiplied. By the mid-20th century, later cell blocks and additions didn't always connect cleanly to the original hub-and-spoke control logic, which weakened the efficiency the design was originally praised for. So Eastern State's late-life problem wasn't only old building. It was old building built for a different world. And when a system loses its philosophy, it often tries to replace it with control. But control costs money. The decline, overcrowding, deterioration, and cost. Eastern State was originally built for a much smaller population than it eventually held. As populations rose across the state system, Eastern State's capacity was pushed and stretched. Overcrowding and operational compromises became part of the prison's reality, especially in the early 20th century. By the 1960s, the physical plant was deteriorating. Stone structures hold up, but roofs, plumbing, heating systems, electrical work, and constant repairs do not stop aging just because the walls are thick. And prisons don't get repaired like museums. They get patched, they get delayed, they get triaged. By the late 1960s, Eastern State was increasingly expensive to keep running and increasingly incompatible with modern standards of operation. It wasn't just historic, it was failing, and that's what leads to the decision point. Because once a prison is deteriorating, the state has two choices: renovate at enormous cost, or transfer inmates and close the site. Eastern State's story ends with the second choice. The endgame timeline, 1970 and 1971. Here is the clean timeline. In 1970, faced with costly repairs and deteriorating conditions, Pennsylvania ceased the operation of Eastern State Penitentiary. That doesn't mean the building instantly became empty forever. In 1971, it was briefly used as a city jail. One documented reason tied to that brief reuse is the need for additional capacity after major disruption at another Philadelphia facility, Holmesburg Prison. But Eastern State's era as a state penitentiary was effectively over. By 1971, the prison closed. The remaining prisoners were transferred, including transfers to facilities like Graterford. This is the last phase people often skip over because it isn't romantic or cinematic. There is no grand final speech. There is paperwork, transfers, keys changing hands, a building going quiet, and then, suddenly, a place designed to control human time had no humans left inside to control. That is a strange kind of ending for a place built on routine. What closure meant for the building. After the prison's closure, Eastern State entered an uncertain period. Historical summaries note that city departments briefly used the site for storage and utility purposes. without meaningful maintenance. That matters because it explains how quickly decay accelerated. A prison is not designed to sit empty. Once the daily maintenance cycle disappears, water gets in. Freeze-thaw damage spreads, metal rusts, wood rots, vandals and scavengers find access. So the decline didn't end when the prison closed. In some ways, the most visible decline began after. And this is where haunting culture gets its fuel, because abandonment adds a second layer to the story. First, what happened to people here? Second, what happened to the place after people left? But we keep this episode anchored to closure, not myth, because closure is not the end of the story. It's the hinge. Next episode, we follow what happened after. The abandoned years, the fight over demolition versus preservation, and how Eastern State became a stabilized ruin that opened to the public in the 1990s because the prison didn't die. It changed forms. Evidence room. Fact tiers for this episode. Verified. Eastern State ceased operating as a state penitentiary in 1970 due to deterioration and costly repair needs. It was briefly used as a city jail in 1971, then closed in 1971. Prisoners were transferred to other facilities, including Graterford. Verified. Eastern State's original separate confinement philosophy had already been officially abandoned by 1913, meaning the institution's late-life operations were no longer aligned with its founding model. Verified. After closure, the site experienced rapid decay, in part because it was used for limited municipal purposes without full maintenance. Theory grounded in the operational arc. Eastern State did not close because it was forgotten. It closed because it became too expensive to keep a deteriorating, outdated facility running in a changing corrections landscape. Next episode, the abandoned years, the preservation battle, and the moment the ruin became a historic site. Thanks for listening to Ancient Secrets and Haunted Journeys. Hosted by Jessica. Written by Jessica and Daniel Pfaffel. Produced by Jessica Pfaffel. Research, music, and artwork by Daniel Pfaffel. For sources and photos, check the show notes. Come back next week for the next episode. And for the full deep dive, the book Eastern State Penitentiary, the Pennsylvania System and the Prison That Changed the World is available now on Amazon.